So UFC Fight Night. I didn't get to see all the fights. I saw pieces of the fight before the main event, and which looked really good. Not familiar with who the fighters were, but they both looked scrappy. It looked like a brawl, probably worth going back and watching. This was the final fight card on Fox. 2018 closes out the contract that the UFC had with Fox, and 2019 brings on the new contract under ESPN, which makes it, I think, a bit more mainstream. I would think, at least on like the sports. That's like the sports network, right? UFC, and it's kind of weird. The ESPN is owned by Disney, and you can have UFC technically not owned by Disney, but its distribution, at least for the free fights, owned by Disney. It's kind of an odd juxtaposition, but interesting nonetheless. And the main event that I was looking forward to, and was a hell of a fight, was between Kevin Lee, the Motown phenom from Michigan, Detroit, Michigan, and Al Iaquinta, the New York's own Long Island boy, Al Iaquinta. And Kevin Lee was ranked third or fourth. I want to say fourth in the lightweight division, and Al Iaquinta was ranked eighth. I thought, spoiler alert if you haven't seen the fight, by the way, that Kevin Lee was going to win. I thought it would be like a pretty scrappy fight, but I thought Kevin Lee had the tools. He was more well-rounded. I just thought that he would definitely get the W. And Al Iaquinta, who I believe his last fight was with Khabib Nurmagomedov, and he took the fight with very little notice. I think 1 week's notice, and he arguably has given Khabib the more competition than other fighters that he has fought in a 1 week's notice. So it's really impressive. So having a full camp and fighting Kevin Lee was kind of like, all right, now let's see what he's going to do against Kevin Lee. Like, if he had that much success against arguably the best lightweight, one of the best lightweights ever in the UFC, he should have a very strong showing. I still thought, though, that Kevin Lee would be able to win the fight. I don't know. Just like Kevin Lee's like style fighting is more, I think, dynamic, more, has a stronger wrestling base, a more dynamic striker. He's like funner to watch, which doesn't really translate in wins, I guess, but I give him like the creativity points and, spinning elbows and shit like that. You're more likely to see from him than Al Iaquinta, I thought. And that kind of wasn't the case. I mean, it was the case for the first 3 rounds of the fight. But Al Iaquinta landed, I think in the very first round, like Kevin Lee threw a punch, he sidestepped it and gave him like a spinning elbow that landed like flush, and Kevin Lee ate it. And then Kevin Lee ate several punches and kicks. Kick to the head from Al Iaquinta that landed flush. Kevin Lee ate it. He ran through it. And he was walking Al Iaquinta down throughout the majority of the fight. I would say the first 3 rounds, 100% Kevin Lee's. Kevin Lee took the first 3 rounds. Then momentum started going in the direction of Al Iaquinta. Al Iaquinta definitely had the 4th and 5th rounds, in my opinion. And in the 5th round, if there were, I would say, an extra minute, maybe minute and a half to the round, I think Al Iaquinta would have knocked out Kevin Lee. But I still, even if the 5th round is like a 10-8 round, and the 4th round was Al Iaquinta's, but I don't think it was like a 10-8. Like, it wasn't like a completely one-sided round. Kevin Lee, I thought, handily took the first 3 rounds. So I thought maybe a split decision, but should be unanimous decision in the favor of Kevin Lee. And it wound up being a unanimous decision in the favor of Al Iaquinta, which was weird. I don't know. I guess when you leave it up to the judges, like Dana White always says, and a lot of pundits always say, don't leave it up to the judges because you can get an outcome like this. Not that anybody goes in there. I'm sure any fighter goes in there wanting to leave it up to the judges. Like, they all want to finish in convincing fashion. Anyway, regardless, it was just surprising. But I guess in the judges' eyes, the fact that, like the last round was a 10-8 round, more than likely. I don't know what the judges' numbers were, but in my opinion, my non-professional, never judged the fight in his life opinion, but just as a fan, seemed like a 10-8 round, meaning that it was completely one-sided for Iaquinta. And the fact that Kevin Lee was like stumbling towards the end, and if there was a little more time, he would have gotten knocked out. More likely than not, maybe all that played in the favor of giving Iaquinta the win. But even if it went in that direction, I think it probably should have been a split decision, I would think. You know what I mean? But it was a unanimous decision, and it is what it is. Good on Iaquinta. I think he called out Conor at the end too. And he referenced his fight with Khabib and said that Conor tapped, and if the path to a rematch with Khabib would have to go through him, or should go through him rather, because he's the one that gave Khabib the better fight. And of course everybody knows that a fight with Conor would mean a ton of dough, and it actually is not a bad setup. I mean, throwing Conor back in there with Khabib is kind of like you're gonna dilute Conor like too much, like his mystique, his name. He's just gonna get like waxed again. So you kind of sort of like want to build him up a little bit more, and like give him someone like an Iaquinta to fight, and like Conor needs a win. He can't just off of like the shit talking and like stuff like that alone like sell every fight for the rest of his life. Like, if he keeps losing, like he needs to mix in a few wins in there. And he always comes back from his losses and wins. He did that with Nate Diaz. Got choked out, lost, came back and beat Nate Diaz. And he wants to do the same with Khabib now that he lost. But he took that like, what was it, a 2-year hiatus, and when he fought against Mayweather in boxing, and then he lost that, and so it's kind of like a loss behind a loss back in the UFC, his first fight back in the UFC. So a nice tune-up fight, if you will, before going back against Khabib might make sense. And Iaquinta would be a worthy opponent, especially with what he just did to Kevin Lee. That would be interesting. But I would definitely like to see Tony Ferguson in there. I would say put Tony Ferguson and versus Khabib for the title. That's rightfully Tony's. Still stand by that. And then on the same card, put Iaquinta and Conor, like co-main eventing it, and then the winner of each face each other. If Conor wins, he'll face the winner of Tony and Khabib, and if Iaquinta wins, he faces the winner of Tony versus Khabib. I think that's a great setup, and you got 1, 2, 3 great fights slated in the lightweight division at the top, regardless of the outcomes of each. That would be very sellable and interesting to watch, and I would love to see that as a fan.